Hello, everyone. Jose, welcome. Good to have you here. Um, now, I want to start. We start a discussion. What I feel is a very important topic, a topic that affects uh, all of us, right? It affects individuals, it affects society as a whole, too, and that is child abuse, child mistreatment. And why? Uh, why does it happen, right? What happens? Uh, well, I feel that being a survivor, right, of child abuse myself, um, that I have some understanding, right, some firsthand understanding on the things, factors that go into that make a person abuse their own children, right? Their own flesh and blood, right? Um, Now, I myself, right, grew up in an abusive home. Uh, my mother was the main abuser in our home, right? Very physically, verbally, uh, emotionally, mentally. But one thing to understand is that, physical abuse is mental abuse, right? We talk about physical, mental, sexual, uh, emotional. But the thing is that physical abuse and sexual abuse are mental abuse, right? They are emotional abuse because they don't they don't only affect you physically, they affect you mentally, emotionally, right? So they are also mental, emotional. They're all tied together, right? There's Sometimes there is no physical abuse and no sexual abuse, but there is emotional or mental abuse, right? So you could have mental abuse, emotional abuse without having without having physical abuse or sexual abuse. But if there is sexual abuse and physical abuse, there is psychological abuse. I just wanted to make that point. Okay. Now, like I was saying, my mother was violent with her words, with her actions, um, and one of the things that she would do was very unpredictable, unpredictable and predictable, right? Uh, because we knew how she was. We knew, but we just didn't know when it was going to happen, right? We knew that sooner or later it was going to happen. It was like walking. People say on eggshells, but I like to say more like walking in a landmine field, right? In a field in landmines, right? You never knew where you were gonna step on a landmine, and it was just, you know, all hell was gonna break loose. Uh, so yeah, she was a very angry person, uh, explosive with her anger, with her words, with uh, with her with her, physically, right? So she did all types of abuse, right? Except sexual, right? She didn't do that, but she did all other types of abuse, which is devastating, obviously. Now, I, when I think about things that I heard her say, right? I know that she was abused herself by her own father, right? Which is my grandfather, right? He, from what I know, from what I heard her say, he was a violent drunk. He would come home and be be drunk and be violent, right? As a result, and there was nobody was safe, right? Everybody, his wife, which is my grandmother, um, the kids, my aunts, my uncles, my mother. My mother was, especially. I heard from what she went through, right? I didn't hear specifically what my aunts and uncles. I heard what she went through, and to a certain point, what my grandmother went through too. His wife. Um, okay, so my mother would fear for her life, right? Like for instance, there was one time where she told me that he was chasing her with a brick, right? That he was. Imagine she was a child, how she must have felt, right? That her own father was chasing her with a brick. He wanted to hit her with a brick. So, uh, yeah, she was also devastated by abuse, right? Uh, Now the question is, right? If she knew how bad it was, right? Why why did she abuse me, right? Why did she uh, was emotionally abusive to my brother, for example, right? My older brother. Um, Now that is a question, right? Why does abuse continue? Why does it repeat itself? Why is it multi generational? Uh, well, in my case, right, in our family's case, um, uh, my mother was diagnosed with with a mental illness, right? Now that happened after we were older children, right? That's because, and I tell you why it happened later. Uh, it didn't happen because this abuse happened in Puerto Rico, by the way. Okay, and in Puerto Rico, in the town that we lived in, right? Uh, in the town that we lived in Puerto Rico, uh, during the 70s, right? It was a small town in the middle of the island, right? Uh, and at that time, there was a little awareness about mental illness and little support, or there was the community was not proactive like it is today, right? In identifying mental illness and treating mental illness, and the stigma, I'm sure, was sky high. If somebody knew there was something, you know, not right up there, uh, so those things I'm sure contributed to her not being diagnosed in Puerto Rico, right? Now, when we left the island, right, I was 11 years old, and we came, right, we came to the United States, and she was quickly diagnosed, right, with a mental illness, and quickly put on disability. So that's how severe it was, right? She didn't have to appeal. She didn't have as you may know, um, when people apply for disability, right? Sometimes they're denied, right? They're denied. Most of the time, people are denied, right? The majority, right? And they have to try again, right? And again, sometimes. Not her. she was not denied. She was approved right away. So they knew, the doctors knew that she was really severely, you know, affected. Her mind was really in bad shape, right? But nobody knew that in Puerto Rico. We obviously didn't know it. We were kids, right? So in my mother's case, right, it was mental illness, right? Mental illness. So I think we can safely say that a reason why parents abuse their children, right? It's mental illness, right? It's a big factor, right? Uh, because parents know, right? Many parents, many loving parents know that you know we can't even imagine, right? Hurting our own children, right? We love our children so much that, right? But when there is a mental illness, we don't. The parents is not able to be a parent. They're not able to. They're not able to act like a parent. They don't see their children like their children, you know. Um, and that's the sad thing, right? That's the sad thing. So um, there should be, right? There should be when parents. I believe when parents, when they first become parents, right? I believe it should be standard that parents are screened for mental illness, for any type of anxiety disorder, anything that potentially, right, could harm their children, right? I think it should be standard. Just like there are many standard when you have a child, right? It's standard to get a birth certificate, right? It is standard to get a social security number for your child. I think that it should be standard that when a parent, even when they are pregnant, right, and getting services, right, that it should be standard to make sure that everything is good with the parents, emotionally wise, mentally wise. Check the history of the parent. Have they been abused, right? And and I think it should be standard across, right? Across, just like getting a birth certificate. That's how standard I think it should be. And then offer, and this is not, I don't, because I know people might be thinking about intrusion, right? Intruding into our lives. It should not be that way. It should not be an intrusion. It should not be intrusive, right? Uh, it should be an assistance, right? An assistance, right? A preventive measure, right? Preventive, like preventive care, right? You exercise, you write, right? To you do that as a preventive measure, right? Preventive measure to stay healthy, right? To and lead a good, healthy life, right? So I believe that you know, and the father too. Obviously, if the father can be reached, and I'm sad to say that, right? Because part of part of what happens, right, in abusive homes, right, a lot of the time the father is absent, right, in some way, shape, or form, right. In my family, my father was absent, even though he was there. He was absent, right. He was emotionally absent toward everyone, right. He didn't show warmth and closeness with anybody in the family, right. And to tell you a little bit about him, He was an alcoholic, right? When before I was born, right? He was a severe alcoholic, right? I mean, to the point where I remember when he was 35 when I was born, right? And I remember my earliest memories of him, right? He was only like 40 when I started having my first memories of him, right? And all his teeth were rotted out, right? And that tells me, right, how much he didn't take care of himself, right? How little self care he had, right? And then from what I heard, right, he was just drinking, and he was an alcoholic, like my grandfather, like my mother's father, right? Very similar, and equally as violent. Okay, because going back to when I was born, right, and my brother was 1 year old, he would come home drunk, right, and beat my mother, right? Very similar to what my mother's father did to her and her mother, right? So my mother was attracted to a person that was just like her abusive father, and they say that we are attracted to our parents, right? That the mother is attracted to men like her father, right? And men are attracted to women that have similar characteristics, right, to their mother, right? For some reason, right? I wouldn't say attracted. I probably wouldn't should not use that word. I think there's something deeper going on. I think they are trying to. I think my mother maybe was trying to win my grandfather's affection through my father, right? I think that that's more of what is going on here. It's a very complex psychological uh, 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 phenomenon, right? Going on in the mind there. So, so yes, right. My father obviously alcoholism, right, is a form of mental. It's not classified as a mental illness, but why not? Right? Why not? You know, if your only thing is alcohol and then you're beating your family, uh, why is not? Why is it not considered a mental illness? I mean, because when the alcohol is out, okay, you withdraw the alcohol and then everything is fine. In my father's case, the alcohol was withdrawn, right? My mother made him stop, right? She just made him decide, right? You're gonna stop. Is it your family or the alcohol, right? He finally chose the family, right? But then, like I say, he was distant. You know, didn't show any affection, and was periodically aggressive. Like I mentioned earlier, he would threaten us, right, with violence, which is, I think, is bad or it's scary. Yeah, it's scary, especially when you got your mother, uh, being abusive periodically, often, right? So you're used to the violence. So there definitely we have a mother who has mental illness, right? Diagnosed with mental illness. I don't know exactly what it is. I heard. Well, she mentioned to me that she was diagnosed with severe depression in Puerto Rico, right? But there were no services, right? I don't know how she got diagnosed, but she said something about that she got diagnosed with severe depression in Puerto Rico, right? But then there were no services, right, to follow up. And then we have a father that is, you know, a dry alcoholic, right? And if he was an alcoholic and did not take care of himself, that means that there were some underlying issues that he was not addressing, right? He stopped the alcohol, but did not address the underlying issues, right? That caused him to be so severely uh, into drinking, right? So then that's what you have, right? You have a mother with mental illness, and you have a father that was an alcoholic. He had issues too. That he didn't talk about his childhood. He never talked about it. He never, but his own father was an alcoholic, as you can see, right? A lot of alcoholism, right? In my family, right? You got my father, you got my mother's father, and you got his father's also an alcoholic. And from what I heard, I I want to say he was abusive too toward my paternal grandmother. Okay. But again, he didn't reveal much, right? He kept it all in. So I didn't get a lot about what happened in his childhood, but I'm sure something did happen, okay? I don't think I think, you are an alcoholic, you're aggressive, and you're emotionally distant from your children. Uh, Something had to happen. He just didn't. I think he was the kind of person that, to hide from it, right? Don't mention it, don't think about it, and pretend that it doesn't exist, right? I think that was the kind of person that he was, right? Um, so yeah, so to give an insight, right, of what happens, right, in an abusive home, right? uh, Mental illness and right. Okay, so I think we'll leave it there right now, and we could continue this discussion. um, there is obviously a lot more to say on this subject, on this very, very important subject that affects all of us, right? Not just the person that is abused, right? It affects society as a whole. Okay, so let me know what you think. If you like the video, please give it a thumbs up to let me know that you're interested in this subject. Subscribe to let me know that you're interested in this subject that is important to you, and that will let me know that I could, bring you more discussions about this very, very important subject that is not talked about enough in our society, sadly enough, and something that is not talked about, something that is not exposed to the light, right, will continue to happen, hidden, right, hidden, but the effects are all too real. You could hide it, but it's still gonna have devastating effects. You cannot hide the effects of child abuse. Okay, well, thank you very much for stopping by. Thank you for joining me in this great discussion. And okay, I hope to hear from you soon.